Good afternoon. I'm Kim Ogg, Harris County District Attorney. I'm joined today by the Honorable Mayor John Whitmire, by our First Assistant, David Mitchum, by our Public Corruption Division Chief, Gavin Ellis, right there, by Assistant DA in charge of this case, Michael Levine, out of the Public Corruption Division, Texas Ranger Investigator Ryan Christian, and Randy Mackey, Houston Public Works Chief Operating Officer. Excuse me, I'm missing my first page of notes. Sorry about that. Dane, do you have a first page here? Sorry, you all. Chewed up my homework. Not in there. We got 7 people, so y'all bear with me just a minute. 7 charges. Oh, nobody's in trouble except me. You may have to commute my sentence here. All right. Now we're ready. People hate public corruption because it costs taxpayer money, and more importantly, it violates the public trust in government. 7 people have been indicted for public corruption felonies ranging from abuse of official capacity to tampering with evidence, namely documents. The charges range across a number of actions which equate to bribery for a scheme centering on the City of Houston waterline repair contracts. The lead defendant, Patrice Lee, is a former high-ranking city employee who had access to approximately $80 million in emergency waterline repair and inspection monies. Lee was arrested last night, and others will turn themselves in coming days. One is her brother, the others are vendors. And what I would encourage everyone in the media to do is take a look at the public document. There's a 29-page affidavit prepared by Ranger Christian that describes the actions of all the parties charged. Full details on the clerk's website contained in that affidavit behind the warrant. I'd like to personally thank my friend, Mayor John Whitmire, who I've known all my life. His administration is dedicated to transparency, and the cooperation that we've received from this administration stands in stark contrast to the last 7 years. I want to thank the new Chief Operating Officer of Public Works for being available for us, to the Texas Rangers who I called in after this set of events and information aired, thanks to Amy Davis. I called the Rangers because reasonable suspicion was presented in the newscast itself. We asked Ranger Christian to take a look at more evidence. It was gathered. Grand juries were called together. ADA Mike Levine presented the cases, and indictments followed. At this time, I'd like to invite Mayor Whitmire for remarks.
Thank you, District Attorney Ogg. I want to thank you and your team for taking this as serious as the public does, and certainly I take it. It was certainly one of the reasons I ran for mayor. I routinely talked about in the campaign we would address conflicts of interest in public corruption. In fact, as recently as a couple of weeks ago when we laid out the budget, and you might notice we didn't ask for additional revenue, although we do have shortfalls, because I assured the public we wouldn't ask for additional revenue until we could guarantee that we've removed conflicts of interest in public corruption. I too saw the news stories last November. I too felt like it should have been referred to a criminal investigative body. thank goodness that we have a district attorney in Kim Ogg that recognized it through her experience that this was not an internal civil matter. Millions of dollars. And Amy, quite frankly, what I saw the previous administration label your work as being rude, I considered it doing your job. You've brought information to my administration. We've addressed it. All the stakeholders that are represented here today will not tolerate public corruption. We will go where the facts take us. And I can assure you, during my administration, whether it's City Hall, Metro, any governmental body, the airport, wherever there is conflicts of interest and where an investigation shows corruption, we will be partnering with those agencies that are doing the investigation to see that people are held accountable. Houston has a shortfall in its financial budget. We cannot ask for additional money until we can assure that every dollar is being honestly used to run city government. I, too, want to applaud Michael Levine for your excellent work and dedication. Ranger Christian, you once again make us proud, and certainly your representation of the Rangers as the top investigative body in the world is demonstrated again today. The press, thank you. You know what concerns me as someone that's been in government all of my adult life, chairing criminal justice, actually as mayor, is what you don't know that scares you the most. People say, what concerns you? It's what I don't know. City of Houston is a very large governmental body. Over 20,000 employees, 22 departments, other divisions like the airport, Metro, I could go on and on. The housing authority. We know that there's conflicts over there. We know that that is the reason I replaced the entire board. They were doing projects with people in environmental dangerous locations because people knew people. So I applaud the criminal investigation. That's why we have the grand jury system. That's why we have the DAs. That's why we have law enforcement. And I just want to applaud everyone that is demonstrating today that we will not tolerate public corruption in the city of Houston. We will go wherever the facts show us in all the departments. Let's just talk about the recovery, where we're hiring emergency workers to go out and collect debris. Previous administrations, that's been very controversial, very questionable practices. I've already sent word to all of my department heads. We're watching you. Don't even think about cutting corners or playing favorites or hiring relatives. Let's run city business as transparent as possible. I will hold people accountable, and that's the reason I'm here today to announce as we go forward. This is just an example of how people will be held accountable. Thank you, Kim.
Thank you, Mayor. To talk about Patrice Lee's scheme that short-circuited every check and balance the city had in place to avoid theft, bribery, the things that we saw, I'm asking Mike Levine to come up here and give you the details. He's been working on the case for several months, and I know he can do a much better job than I about the details.
Thank you, folks. Just a couple of quick thanks first. Ryan Christian and I have worked together on this investigation for 6 months. It's late nights, it's early mornings. He answers the phone, and he worked hard. So I really want to say thank you. I want to say thanks to a lot of folks in our office that aren't here, the paralegals and admins and fraud examiners, and it takes a lot of people to put together a large investigation, so thanks. And I really want to thank grand jurors, citizens of Harris County. Grand jury was integral in this investigation, so thanks to them. For the details of this case, we spent weeks putting together a almost 30-page probable cause affidavit. It's on the district clerk website. It will give you a lot more detail than I ever could. You can't encapsulate, 6 months of work and a few years of corruption in a few minutes. But I will tell you in the most general sense, we have filed 14 charges against 7 defendants. Most of those were indicted by a grand jury yesterday, and a few were direct filed with the judge. In the summer and fall of 2022, Patrice Lee and at least 2 businessmen came up with a scheme to essentially put her on the payroll as a consultant of the very same companies that were getting contracts and doing business with her department at the city. And they did that in exchange for favorable treatment, faster payment, larger and bigger deals with the city. And as you'll see if you look at the detailed affidavit, in fact, those companies that were willing to pay off the city employment managing their contracts did see their dealings with the city grow and grow. Eventually, Patrice Lee found 2 more defendants that were willing to enter into a similar scheme. And then finally, along with her brother, formed a shell company that directly was a way for her to essentially divert over $400,000 of city money to herself. On that last note, we charged an abuse of official capacity charge. That is a first-degree felony. Carries possible punishment of 5 to 99 years, Texas Department of Corrections. We have filed multiple charges of bribery. That's a second-degree felony. That means 2 to 20 years is the punishment range, TDC. And then we've also filed 2 charges of tampering with a government document, alleging that the defendants made false statements and what they knew to be false statements in government documents. That's a state jail felony. So that would be 180 days to a maximum of 2 years in state jail. Last thing I want to say, Agent Christian said I can give out the phone number. Ranger Christian said I can give out this phone number, 281-517-1400 for their Texas Rangers office. We are certain that there are other affected people that we have not identified yet. There are certainly more witnesses. If you're someone that has information related to this investigation, we'd urge you to call the Texas Rangers, come forward. The only way we stop public corruption is with the public coming forward to be a witness. So we'd encourage you, if you think you're a witness in this case, to please contact the Texas Rangers. Thank you. Can you state your name and your title, please? Yeah, it's Mike Levine, and I'm an assistant district attorney for Harris County.
All right. You know, the last thing I want to talk about is the damage. The damage of public corruption in the big picture is the public's loss of trust in government to be responsible stewards of their money. But we also expect good service from government. And when government ends up paying much more for much less, the public loses. In this case, because the same people were handling the repairs on an emergency basis, the inspections on an emergency basis, and the delivery of contracts to certain vendors, all of the normal checks and balances were averted. And that is a recipe for corruption. And so I want to thank everybody involved for helping Houstonians get what we pay for. In this case, we know at least $750,000 went into the pockets of Patrice Lee, her brother, and others. Now, how bad the public was ripped off, we'll never know. Because if you've experienced a water main break or any kind of leak in your area, you know that it took a minute to get it fixed. Sometimes the repair was good, sometimes it wasn't. It happened in my neighborhood repeatedly. And so not knowing which repairs were good and which are bad, this may be a problem that we continue to pay for as taxpayers. But most importantly today, the perpetrators are being held accountable. If you have further information about this, an ongoing investigation, please call the Texas Rangers. And again, Ryan, thank you for your work. Mike, thank you for your work. Mayor, thank you. We'll open it up to questions.
But for the original reporting of my colleague next to me, would we be here today?
You know, there were a lot of citizens who complained about their water bills. And whether the water bill problem is related to the theft and bribery problem remains to be seen. So we knew there was a problem because so many people got outrageous bills. But when it came to internal cheating on contracts funded by emergency money, I don't think we would have, short of the investigation done by Amy Davis. That's what I keyed off of, our team keyed off of. Enough facts were presented that we had enough suspicion to call the Rangers. And when there's something like public corruption, it's tough to call HPD to investigate city employees. It's tough to call the county to investigate county employees. So we utilize independent law enforcement agencies like the Rangers. But like all of us, they've got limited resources, and that means we depend heavily on the individual commitment and work of the Ranger assigned. So thank you, Ryan.
I'll be real clear. I don't believe we'd be here but for Amy's investigation. Certainly from the seat that I fill. It kept the transparency on the issue. It kept it on the forefront of the front burner, I should say. So yes, and it certainly kept me focused. You notice we do have a significant turnover in public works and other departments, and it's to get the folks that agree with me in transparency and holding people accountable. So yes, the reports and also that major package we rolled out on water billing, accurate, transparent, and fair water billing is certainly a result of that investigative report. And the real final straw was to watch Amy go up to the person's door at an apartment that's supposed to be an operating business, and he didn't want to answer questions. He didn't have a business. That's all the investigators needed, and that's all I needed to know. We had a serious problem at the city, and as the DA Og just said, it's what we don't know. We do weekly hundreds of contracts dealing with vendors, so we need to all be on alert and do our jobs, and that's where the press can play a significant role. You know, I see conflicts, airport contracts, food venues, Metro, a lot of political players in town on the payroll over at Metro. So I've been down there almost 5 months. There's a lot of work left to do. We're going to be working with the Rangers. We're going to send information to the DA, the Rangers. When it doesn't look right, we're going to report it.
When's the last time a public corruption probe and snare was made?
Well, let me say, we have not had good cooperation from the city before this, and we have not filed on a group of people involved in a scheme. It could be called organized crime if the crimes are on the list, but I mean, they worked in collaboration and coordination with each other. I don't remember in my 7.5 years during our administration, we have not had this many people charged.
The previous administration tried to keep it internal, did not want it to be referred to criminal investigators. And that's even in the environment of William Paul Thomas being investigated, pleading guilty, right in the middle of the conflicts of interest and potential and obvious corruption that is now being revealed.
So on that note, is the OIG investigation been complete?
No. And I'm concerned about the operation of the Inspector General's office, but this was referred out and encouraged to become a criminal investigation by my administration, and that office is under close review by me. I want a little more aggression, a little more transparency in that office. I'm sorry.
No, they just wanted to close.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but the affidavit lays out how it was Lee who was in charge of verifying the work history and the backgrounding of these companies that would get these contracts. How has the vetting process changed when it comes to specifically emergency repair contracts?
Well, we have a new operating officer at Public Works, and I'll be glad if Randy would like to yield to that. You know, I've only been there 5 months. This was really revealed back in November. We've done our due diligence in that we talked to Randy and others. There was strong pressure to keep this in-house, and we can hopefully someday understand that. I don't. That's why we have such great investigators with the Texas Rangers, a great DA's office, and others. So I referred it. I've been supporting folks to look at it. Policy's been changed. We have new operating officers, and I think there's a new, and there better be, a message at City Hall that this kind of nonsense won't be tolerated, or we will put you at the forefront of the problem. We'll hold you accountable. And it's not just City Hall. It's Metro, it's the airport, it's doing business with your friends at City Hall. I want arm's length relationships and contracts with vendors. Don't be going to your friends. And there's a lot of that still very prevalent. Randy, you want to speak to changes you've made and noticed since you've been down there?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Mayor. You know, this being an item that we recognize is the ultimate betrayal of public trust, where not only are we responsible for ensuring that we provide safe and accurate services to the people in terms of providing good drinking water. I mean, the water main breaks is all about our ability to deliver water to residents of Houston. So repairing them, of course, takes precedence in all that we do. That's why there was significant money invested in doing this in the first place, and why it fell under the guise of being an emergency, because where we had more than 1,000 breaks at a given point over the summertime during the drought, it was imperative that we get out there and we got the work done as quickly as we could. The problem with that, of course, is that if you don't have good internal checks and balances when you start that process, and where you have a process that allows a single individual to control the majority of the work and everything that's being done without any oversight above that, or even when you rely on the people above that person to then provide you good and accurate information, you're only going to be operating with as much as you know. The mayor alluded to that. The things that keep us up at night are the things that we don't know about. You know, Public Works as a department in the city is one of the largest. It's the largest by personnel in terms of non-uniformed individuals, and even that's a misnomer. Most of our people wear a different type of uniform. It's just not one with a badge out there. And so it's really difficult to make sure you know what everybody's doing at all times and in all places. After this broke, and thanks to Amy for this, because as soon as that came to the attention, we of course knew we had to do at least an internal investigation to address the personnel issue, right? Civil service issues within the city require you to go through certain processes. You do have to do some things internally, but it was imperative, too, that we take it to the next level. We look at it from the criminal standpoint. And then we start looking at our processes. How do we find the vendors that we're working with? In this instance, as the affidavits lay out, there was some fabrication of the information that went there. As this case proceeds, we'll find out what all of those details are. I'm confident that we'll find out many more that we still don't know today, because the investigation continues as it goes here. But we can do simple things, for instance, like maybe we go and check out where a business is located and we make sure that it's a real business, not an apartment. Those are some of the things that may add additional work and scrutiny to our people, but it's the low-hanging fruit, if you will, that allows us to make sure that we can have confidence that we're working with the people we need to work with. If we don't have a bona fide history with a vendor, why would we bring that person in, for instance, to do significant emergency work for significant dollars? This process, though, and I have to emphasize this, has got to always be under review. It's not something where we can set it up and say, oh, we're good and we're confident with what we have right now. We've got to make sure that we're continually checking ourselves to make sure that the work we're expecting, the work that the public is expecting, is the work that's going to be delivered. And so that's more than Public Works. That's us working with the finance department, with strategic procurement, in terms of how we source people, how we vet them, how we make sure that we collect a good log and a good history, and then how we prevent bad actors or people that don't deliver good services to the city from being the first ones to be able to sign up to help us in the future.
And so where are you in that process in terms of reaching those ideals?
It's completely ongoing. I can tell you, we started actually going out immediately. Strategic procurement took the lead on this particular instance of actually physically going out and checking locations of people, right? I think we've got a lot of work to do, and it's like I said, it's beyond just Public Works. We'll have an opportunity to get together with larger groups of some of the city's leaders, folks that the mayor has made sure have that commitment to transparency across the city to be able to put these processes forward. And importantly, too, to make sure that the public understands what that process is as well. We don't want to, nor do we intend to, keep all of those things secret, but it has to be a detailed and it has to be an exhaustive process.
What about the residents? What about the people affected? You already identified the problem. Whoever families that lost that amount of money, you already put in plan something about what they can expect for the future and for the money that they lost.
Yeah, are you speaking about the high water bills?
I don't know if the mayor can answer that question.
Well, we've completely transformed the billing process. If you want to talk about our infrastructure, that's a whole nother conversation. We still have lots of miles of drainage and water lines that are going to have to be addressed. I think Randy emphasized the environment and the circumstances of the emergency nature of these vendors, and that was brought about by the drought, the broken water lines. Will you ever be able to make the citizens whole if through some of this corruption shortchanged them? No. All we can say to the public is We've identified the players, the bad players, and they're going to be held accountable. And punishment and imprisonment is a pretty high price to require those individuals to pay, but we don't hesitate to hold them accountable.
Can I?
Yeah,
add one
sure,
thing?
sure.
You know, Randy talked about red flags, and that's really what public corruption investigations rely on, red flags. Something that causes the media or causes another public official or an average person to say, you know, that doesn't smell right. In this instance, several of the vendors who were not qualified started their companies just months before they got very large contracts. We've seen that at the county level, and we've seen it in other public corruption cases. So the length of time that a corporation has been established, their work history, who's on their board and whether they have any conflicts of interest or family or friendly ties with the people voting on those contracts. Those are the things that we look for in public corruption cases. Thank you.
And I think I need to emphasize how many good employees, and I would encourage our honest, vast majority of city employees to come forward. They don't have to go along to get along. When they see corruption, conflicts of interest, bring it to my attention, and we won't tolerate. I think council's going to have to do a better job. You know, council voted this through by the recommendation of the previous administration, Sylvester Turner. So council, continue to ask the right questions and just be as transparent so we don't find ourselves in a meeting like this. Let's be very proactive, and that's what, you know, I'm so proud to have Randy. You can just listen to him. He's a public servant that's going to hold people accountable, and the finance department as well. The mayor's team, you know, we don't tolerate conflicts. We just don't. And so now it's spreading over to Metro, it's spreading over to the airport. You notice we have a new airport director. Well, that came about because of discussions of conflicts of interest. We got a complete new housing authority, came about because the awareness of conflicts of interest. We got to keep our friends out of city business unless they're qualified, and it's very transparent. In fact, quite frankly, I don't think city employees ought to be hanging out with their friends that are vendors. There ought to be a distance there. Very transparent. Metro for darn sure. You start looking at 29 vice presidents, most making around 300 grand. Up until a month ago, they were still working at home under COVID conditions. There's going to be changes in this city, and the press can play a really primary role in that. Yes, ma'am.
I have a few questions, and Randy, I think, might be able to answer these. I mean, we're right at the beginning of summer where we usually see these, at least for the last couple of years, the problems with the lines breaking and leaking. So knowing now that EPO process, the only thing that sort of we said in this investigation that allowed for supervisors not to notice this was that the vendors checked the box that said no instead of telling the truth. So how is that going to change? Are we still going to have these emergency purchase orders where they can just say, okay, let's, I mean, how is that changing?
No, I think that's not just a fair question, but a great question. We find ourselves in an interesting spot right now because we're at the end of our fiscal year, for instance. We run to the end of the fiscal year, and things that we had appropriated in order to do and perform work starts to become very, very thin. Water line repair contracts is one of those. That's why there were EPOs in the first place, was because in the previous budget cycles there was not enough money that was budgeted for dedicated vendors through the normal procurement process to be assigned to go out and perform water line repairs. Certainly not at the volume that we had. Now, the weather so far this year seems to indicate maybe we won't experience the drought that we had before, but we don't know that. It was at this point last year, in fact, June 1st last year, that we were under 100 active water main breaks across the city. It was a significant milestone. Now, we have to ask ourselves the question, and we're still going through this process with the things that were done, how accurate were those numbers when they were reported to us in the first place? I can tell you as of right now today, we have nearly 1,200 active breaks across the city. We've spent months and months since this investigation to make sure that the data that's coming into us from a management perspective, from a leadership perspective, is accurate so that we know where to put our resources and what resources that we need. And then as we go into the budget cycle for this coming year, that we dedicate the appropriate amount of money. You notice in the Public Works budget for this year, there's an additional $25 million that's dedicated specifically to regularly procured contracts for water main repairs. And so the regular procurement process, very different from an EPO, right? There's an exhaustive application that goes through, there's information, there's tax data that goes through, beyond what I can do, because that's frankly outside of our realm, but we have dedicated those resources to make sure that we can avoid, to the extent possible, emergency purchase orders. It's not possible to completely avoid them. Something's going to pop up for which we didn't originally budget. A great example of that is we had a significant break in the medical center about 6 months ago. We're still going through the repair process for that. That's something that's cost millions of dollars to repair both water and sanitary sewer lines. That was not something we would have contemplated before. Those are the things that we look at, we say, well, this is a bona fide emergency. But had the department done a good job in the first place of recognizing, well, we had 1,000 leaks this last summer, we had 1,000 leaks the summer before, perhaps in the budget process, if we'd been more prepared, we could have regularly procured people. When we set ourselves up for success rather than failure, rather than scrutiny that's not necessary because we're doing the job that the public's asking us to do.
But it sounds like her question was, what are you doing right now to change the EPO process so that it's not ripe for graft?
Yeah, no, and that's a fair question.
What's the answer?
The EPO process is not a process that I own. And so that's why I say this is something that is collaborative beyond multiple departments. Ultimately, when those EPOs are issued, that comes through the finance department, through strategic procurement. In my department, though, what we do is we don't allow one person alone to be the only person verifying the information that's submitted to finance for approval in the first place. Finance has put in additional measures that they'd be happy, I'm sure, to share with you at that point. But from our side, there's never going to be a situation where one person and one person alone is the only author and verifier of the truth being submitted.
As was the case.
As was the case here. That is correct.
Can you tell me how many employees in Public Works were terminated connected to this?
I know of 3 that were terminated directly connected to this.
Can you tell us who those are? That seems like a low number.
Patrice is the first one that I can tell you, and you'll have to forgive me, I cannot remember the other 2 names.
Also, it is an ongoing investigation. I'd rather not name them.
If I have a question for Texas Ranger, are you speaking?
He's our primary witness in the case, so I just ask as a matter of professional courtesy, you not ask him questions. We're here available to you.
Sure. District Attorney or Mike, do we know what she did with the $750,000?
Mike?
We do. It's all going to be courtroom evidence. I'd rather not go into it, but I think a lot of it has been spent.
I know there's new cars involved.
We've heard that. Can we seize them at some point? I mean, what happens next?
Like I said, this investigation is absolutely ongoing. We have other suspects that we're investigating, as well as other financial issues involving the suspects we've already filed on.
You asked me about restitution. You know, you can seize criminal instruments. Whether the automobiles that different people purchased are part of that is not known right now. But thieves rarely have savings accounts. And it's very difficult for the public, in cases of public corruption, to be made whole. That was another question. It's just really tough. And that's what punishment is all about. We want to deter this kind of behavior. Sure, we'd like to get the money back, and often we use that as a bargaining tool with criminally charged defendants. But in cases of public trust, it's important to make examples out of people who are actively harming the public's trust in government. That's priceless.
Mayor, you mentioned Metro and the airport a couple of times, more than a couple of times. Are there investigations ongoing there? Have they been getting visits from the Rangers as well?
Like I said, we would not comment on investigations. I just am aware of conflicts of interest, how's that? And then it's up to the investigative bodies to determine whether it's criminal in nature and where the facts will lead them. You know, I'm not new to government. I'm not new to Houston. I know a lot of the players, and I've watched some of the players do well beyond their city means. I think William Paul driving, what the hell was he driving, a Mercedes or something? You know, there's just certain things that just, you know, don't make sense. And if you've got experience like I have and like the district attorney has, it just sets off the alarms. In my world, in my team, it not only has to be right, it has to look right. And when I see people going over to the housing authority and getting approval for projects that an objective person would say, no, we're not going to build a house. We got a project going up that we don't even know who's going to occupy it because it's sitting on a landfill. And I would suggest it was only relationships that got that approved. And we put an end to it. It starts at the top. Before things go on the agenda, I look at them, I'm briefed on them. Randy's in the meeting. We ask procurement, who's this person? What's their track record? And that's where I think council's got to do a better job. We've had some of the contractors that were involved, and I haven't seen the names, but we had a number of contractors come before council and said, we're caught up in this. We did the work, and we can't get paid. And several council members just assume that they're there in good faith. I'm interested to do a cross-file and see if any of the indicted individuals were the ones that came before council and got some sympathy that they weren't being paid. So give us more time, but, you know, Metro, the airport, give out large number of contracts, and I want to continue to review those agencies, make sure that they're as proper as we expect them to be.
Mark, is Mr. Sylvester Turner part of your investigation? You guys talked to him about this? Yes.
I'll answer that. When it's an ongoing investigation, we rarely confirm or deny just an investigation because it's dangerous to speak too quickly. It is always up to the public and a grand jury, so we can't answer that question.
District Attorney, so we know that these investigations take time, that this investigation is ongoing, and you have 5 more months in office.
6.
How confident are you that these cases will be prosecuted? Because we're talking this would happen after you leave office, right?
I'm confident that as long as I'm the district attorney, the public can expect public corruption to be prosecuted regardless of the position, the political party, or the power of the targets and those accused. After December 31st, I don't have control of that, and we'll just have to see how the next district attorney deals with public corruption. And before we close out, I'd like just to take a moment of personal privilege to thank the Dean of the Senate, formerly my state senator in District 15, who followed Senator Jack Ogg, my father. We've been in politics, the senator actively, and me as a family member or participant, much of our lives, almost all of the mayor's life and his children's life. And we expect public servants to serve and to get poorer, not richer, through their service, and for the public to benefit from the sacrifices that are required by public service. So we don't have a lot of empathy or mercy for those who would steal from the public out of their position of power given to them by the public. Thank you, Mayor, for your good example all these years.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank
That's it.
y'all.